Hi, it's Daniel from Petals. I've just switched on my Bernina long arm quilting machine and I want to show you how to use it. Before I start sewing, I usually like to pop open the plate and give it a clean out. It's been a little while since I've cleaned my machine. Like quite a bit of fluff around there. I usually use some tweezers to grab any big chunks out. Quite a bit of lint built up in there. And you can also use a paintbrush just to get any loose little bits of lint out. And you also want to make sure that these little lenses are clean as well. When you're happy with how clean that's looking, we will need to put a little bit of oil in. This is the oil bottle that came with the machine. You should only use this oil for your Bernina long arm machine. I'll show you where to put it. Our two little dots that are currently hidden, we'll need to turn our hand wheel slowly towards us, and that will reveal two small dots right there, which are this dot and this dot. And on each of those dots, I'll put one tiny drop of oil. You don't need really a lot, as long as you're oiling it regularly. If your machine has been sitting for a long time, or if it's brand new out of the box, you can put one extra drop of oil on this long bar here. This one that's running right there. That'll just help to make sure you have some fresh oil if your machine's been sitting for a while. Once everything's cleaned and oiled, we can pop the plate back on, starting with the left side over the two little lugs there, and press it down firmly. Now I'm going to wind a bobbin. This is the Bernina bobbin for the Q Series machine. Beautiful red color. I usually will keep my top thread on the left side and my bobbin thread on the right side. And I'll place my bobbin on the bobbin winder with the Bernina writing facing towards the Bernina, towards the machine. Take my bobbin thread up through the two guides on the tree, and this part here is very important. That's the bobbin thread tensioner. You want to go anti-clockwise around there, usually one time for most threads. If you are using quite a fine thread, you might want to go around twice. And then when it comes to the bobbin winder, there's a little arrow telling us the direction the thread will go. So I'll usually wrap it around 5 or 6 times just to make sure it's securely on there. And there's a handy little thread trimmer behind the lever here. To start the bobbin winding, we can simply press the lever down and it'll start winding. You can stop the winding at any point just by flicking the lever. Otherwise, when it fills up fully, it will stop by itself. You can also change the winding speed on the screen. If you want to slow it down or speed it up. I'll leave it there. And you can take off your bobbin and trim it just there. Now we're going to put the bobbin into the bobbin case, and I want to put it so that the Bernina writing is facing towards me so I can still read it. And then we'll bring the thread through the small slot there, and then underneath the tension spring. It should make a tiny click once it's in. When we pull on the thread a little bit, the Bernina should spin clockwise. That's how we know everything's spinning in the right direction. Bernina goes clockwise. This handy tool is the bobbin tension gauge. This one basically tells us how tight our bobbin thread is coming out from the bobbin case. This one clips in just like that. And we'll take the thread around the white pulleys, under the first one, over the second one, and through this little slot here. When we draw it out, it's going to tell us a number of how tight this bobbin thread is. At the moment it's almost to 300. We want to reduce that to be around 220 on the gauge. And the way we do that is with this red screwdriver here with the flat point. We can adjust the black screw here. Lefty loosey will loosen it, and if we do a righty tighty, that will tighten it. So I'm going to reduce that by turning it to the left. You only want to make very small adjustments because a small turn can have a big effect. Now we're about 240, 250. I'll turn it a tiny bit more. Very tiny turn. And now we're at about 220. It may vary a little bit as you pull it. As long as on average it's around 220, that should be good. Once you're happy with that, you can take the bobbin case off here and we'll pop it in the machine. Let's head under the table and we'll insert the bobbin case. When we insert the bobbin case, we want the lever to be going horizontally side to side, and there'll be the little slot in the top. When you press it in, it'll make a click noise. That's how you know that it's in firmly, incorrectly. If you do want to remove it later, lift the latch on the right side and pull it out. Before I start threading the top thread, I want to make sure that everything's in the right spot. There should be a little hole that we should be able to see here, but it's not showing up right now. So what we can either do is turn by hand until this little lever pops into place, or we can do a back kick on the foot pedal, just like that. That will also pop it into the right spot for threading. For the top thread, we want to pass it through these two guides on the thread tree, and then we'll come down to the side. On the side of the machine, there's two clips here. Most of the time, I'll just skip the left one, put it only in the right. If your thread is metallic or is having some issues with breaking, or if it doesn't like heat dying too quickly, you can pop it through both of these. And in the middle, there's a little felt pad which will be able to hold some silicone oil, which will coat the thread as it goes through. That can be helpful for some kind of threads, but for a majority of the time, I'll usually skip that and just keep it only in the right. Just like that. Next, I'm going to go from the back to the front of this hook, and then I'll bring it around the front of the machine through the gap here. Now that we're on the other side, I'll drag the thread around this silver part here. I'll just trace the shape of that one with the thread going around wide, and that should drop it in the right spot for us. And then there's a little symbol indicating we go down and up around this silver part here. So bring it back up, and then I will take the thread from the back to the front through this little hole here. Just like that. Then we'll bring it back down in front of the silver piece, in front of this piece here. Now put the thread through this guide here, and then also behind the small hook just here, just behind this one. And now we will thread the needle. I do have another video on how to use this needle threader in more detail, so if you're not quite sure how to use it, I definitely suggest checking that one out too. Before I start to sew on my final project, I like to make sure that my top tension and the bottom bobbin tension is balanced nicely together. I want the top and bottom thread to meet and form the knot in between the layers of my fabric. And ideally, I don't want to see any of the thread knots forming on the top or the bottom side. Usually I will spend some time before I start sewing just to make sure it all looks good. There's nothing worse than finishing a project only to realize that your tension has been a bit off the whole time. So I will do some test sewing. Usually I'll use the same fabric and same wadding that I'll be using for my project just to make sure everything's the same. I'll usually do some curves and a pointy shape, because tension issues usually will show themselves on those particular shapes. So I'll do some quick circles. And I like to do a star shape as well. Just like that, nothing too fancy. Here's how it looks from the top. I'm not seeing any bobbin thread poking through the top. And on the bottom, I am seeing a little bit of purple thread poking through on the very tippy corners of my star, and very slightly on the curve. So I'll increase my thread tension a little bit. The top thread tension is controlled in this top left menu here. I might increase it to 4.5, and then I'll see how that's looking. You want to make small adjustments. If your bobbin thread is at the correct tension, you shouldn't really need to adjust too much unless you're doing some extremely thick wadding, or some types of fabric need some more adjustment, but generally somewhere around 4 to 5 is pretty good. Here we are with my tension on 4.5. Still looking good on the top, there's no bobbin threads poking through. And the points on my star, I'm not getting the big purple showing through as it was before. That's looking pretty good. I can see a slight shadow, but generally I'm pretty happy with that. I could increase a little bit further. Let's see what happens when we do that. I've just turned my tension up to 5 now, and I'll just see how that looks. Here we go. I think that's looking quite even. On the top and the bottom, I can just barely see the bobbin thread showing on the top. And on the bottom, I can just barely see a speck of purple showing through on the points and on the curve. I think because I'm using a very contrasting thread, and the purple does show up a little bit on this calico fabric. You can kind of see the shadow of the purple, but I can tell that the knot's being formed quite close to the center of the fabric here. I think for this particular fabric and wadding combination, I think tension top on number 5 looks pretty good. But every fabric's going to be slightly different, every wadding's going to be slightly different. So I think it is worthwhile to spend a bit of time just to check the tension and make sure it's looking good. If you do find you need to go up to very extreme tension, if you're up at like maybe 6 or 7, probably double check your bobbin tension again. Because if you have to have too much tension on the top, it can sometimes make the fabric not sit so evenly and not look so nice. It can sometimes buckle and pinch the fabric. So if you are finding you have to go up to too high of a tension, definitely double check your bobbin tension on the gauge we looked at before. Let's take a look at some of the different BSR modes this machine has. There's 3 to choose from, and the manual mode, which is unregulated stitching. In mode 1, the needle will continue to move up and down even though the fabric is not moving, and then when I do move it, it will regulate the stitches to be nice and even for me. In this mode we can change how many stitches we have per inch. So we can increase that if we're doing some detailed work, or if you're doing much more broad patterns, you can reduce that. We can also change the speed at which the needle is moving up and down when we pause. If you're just beginning, you might want to slow that down a bit just to give you a bit more time to think. And I'll show you how that one looks when we sew with that mode. I will just draw my thread up. This mode is particularly good if you're trying to get a nice and crisp point. When I pause, there's a couple of stitches on the spot, which is great for getting a nice and crisp point. Nice and crisp points there. I'll mainly use this mode if my patterns are using some sharp points and I want to make sure they're looking nice and crisp. So if you have a pattern that has some nice points, you want to accentuate those points a little bit, then BSR mode 1 is ideal for that. In BSR mode 2, very similar, except when we stop moving the fabric, that will stop moving the needle as well. So that gives us a bit of extra time to think if we're doing some broad patterns or broad curves. Just it'll allow you to have some time to think without it making a bunch of knots on the fabric. It's especially useful with ruler work. You can pause and reposition your ruler and things like that without it making a big knot where you don't want one. Let's have a look at how that one works as we sew. So if I pause here now, the red light is still on, which means it's still watching my fabric. But because I'm not moving it right now, the needle is still. so I can think about where my curve is going. Then as soon as I move the fabric again, the machine starts. So that's quite handy just to give yourself a little bit of time to think and pause before you continue on. If you are doing a pattern with the points, it can sometimes not look as crisp. So if your pattern does have a lot of corners or points, probably not the best mode, but certainly for broad sweeping curves, that would be my choice. BSR mode 2. And the third BSR mode here is a basting mode. So we have a few choices for how many stitches per inch that we want to baste with. I'll leave it on the default 2 for now, and I'll show you how that looks. It's quite handy if you want to baste your quilt with some stitches. It gives you a very loose stitch. It's fairly easy to get out later on. So if you want to secure the fabric and wadding around where you're working, super handy feature to have, very useful. If I increase the stitches per inch, it'll make the stitches a bit shorter. And if I put it to 1 stitch per inch, it'll be much longer. And you might think, as you use this mode, the machine is not working, but especially the lower stitches per inch, you do need to move the fabric quite far before it will actually do anything. And finally, we have the manual mode, which will just sew at a fixed speed that we set here. This one is completely unregulated, so the stitch length completely depends on how you're moving the fabric. It's kind of the old-fashioned way to do it. Also useful for cases where maybe you don't want a perfect looking stitch, if you're doing thread painting, or you want to get more of a textured effect that's not perfect, then that. And the stitch length is all over the place. It's kind of random length depending on how fast I move the fabric. But for some applications that may be desirable if you're doing thread painting and things like that. There's one button here which is very useful. It's the kickstart button. So basically when we press that, all we need to do is press backwards on the foot pedal. We don't need to continually hold it down. So that lets us focus a bit on what we're doing, a bit more on our artwork rather than coordinating our hand and foot together. So at the moment, I will bring up my thread first, and I'll hit the kickstart button. And then as soon as I press my foot on the pedal, on the back of the pedal, the machine will switch on. And then if I want to stop the machine, I simply press backwards on my foot pedal again. So here is starting, I press it once, and the machine will run. Now when I stop, press it again, and the machine stops. When you're finished with the kickstart mode, you want to go back to change some settings or change your mode, just hit exit, and you'll be back to the regular screen here. And there's one more setting I want to talk about, which is the needle stop. So this symbol here will change depending if you want it to stop in the up position or in the down position. And that will stop with the needle either in the fabric or up out of the fabric when you release your foot from the foot pedal. So if I do some sewing, and I release my foot, it's going to plant that needle in the fabric, which will let me pivot or just hold my position in the fabric without having an ugly long stitch if I don't position it perfectly when I start again. Most of the time I'll leave it in the down position for that reason, just so I can leave that needle planted in the fabric. And then when I start sewing again, it's going to end up in the perfect spot. With the BSR mode 2 specifically, When I pause, the needle will stay up no matter what that setting is. That's simply because as soon as I move the fabric, it's ready to go. And then as soon as I lift my foot completely off the pedal, it'll plant the needle in the fabric and save my position. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. And if you do have any other questions that I may not have covered in this video, leave them in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer your questions. See you later.